Joining us now to talk about that is Clare Lopez, Senior Fellow at the Center for Security Policy, former CIA Operations Officer. And Clare, welcome back to the show. Great to talk to you again.
Hi, Steve. Thanks. I'm glad to be with you.
Well, thank you. I know you're on the road, and I appreciate your time. I don't know how much of the president's speech you heard, but clearly he addressed the issue of terrorism, basically boiling it down to an al-Qaeda problem, boiling it down to the reason people get radicalized in other countries is poverty that we have to fix. That we have to work with the Muslim community in this country because the Muslim community is quick to report radicals and want no part of them. It just seems like he's living in an alternate universe to a great extent.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, alternate universe is a good way to put it. There's no indication, for instance, that the attackers in London, in the London killing from yesterday, have any connection to al-Qaeda whatsoever. They're still investigating, of course, but what we do know, of course, is that they are Muslims. And they are jihadists who were hollering at the top of their lungs, according to reports, Allahu Akbar, as they attacked this poor British soldier.
Absolutely, and I don't know if that poverty played any role. As a matter of fact, I believe that one of them, at least, came from a devout Christian family, and he converted to Islam. And again, I don't know how the president's MO of these terrorists in other countries holds water in this case whatsoever. Talk to me about what is going on. Again, here we have, like you said, they're not al-Qaeda. We don't know who they were influenced by. We know that the British authorities did have their eyes on them in the past, yet they were able to grab an off-duty soldier or run down an off-duty soldier, vehicular jihad as it was called by our previous guest, and then proceed to behead him. What is the significance in the beheading? Of course, we saw it with, the murders that took place with the two brothers involved in the bombing. It turns out that they were involved in that triple homicide where the heads were severed. We've seen it before. We saw it with Daniel Pearl, and of course, we saw it with Van Gogh in the Denmark. So, what is it with the beheading?
Well, beheading is a typically Islamic form of killing, and it derives directly from the Quran, where verses talk about striking at the neck of the infidels. And so it has become a hallmark in some ways of jihadists attacking their enemies, in this case, this British soldier.
So what do we do? What does London do? What does England do? What do we do? I mean, to combat the I guess these have to be classified as lone wolves because they're not. If they're not, linked directly to Al Qaeda, so are the brothers in Boston, and and so are many would-be attackers that have been thwarted lone wolves. I mean, they may have Al Qaeda influence, but they're not the card-carrying members. So, what is the answer as opposed to what the president prescribes? What do we need to do in this country? What does Western countries have to do all over the world to make sure this gets thwarted and doesn't grow out of control?
Well, I think you put your finger right on it, Steve, when you talked about the use of the term lone wolf. These attackers are not lone wolves, even if they are not attached in any way to Al-Qaeda or some other recognized terrorist group. That doesn't make them lone wolves. They are Muslims. That makes them part of the Ummah. They are part of the worldwide Ummah. They are part of the worldwide global international jihad movement. They learned the tenets of Islam, which command jihad against the infidel somewhere, perhaps in their families, perhaps in the mosques which they attended, perhaps with the addition of some connections online, on the internet, where, of course, Al-Qaeda and others post things like the Al-Qaeda Inspire magazine. And on that note, let me mention the Inspire magazine specifically has of late and more recently called upon Muslims the world over to engage in what is called individual jihad. That means you don't have to go to a battlefield someplace like Afghanistan or Syria. You do jihad wherever you are, in the place where you live. And it suggests, the soft targets that they ought to attack. And they have mentioned things like shopping malls and sporting events and, unfortunately, children, schools. And so these Muslims who answer that call to jihad, and by the way, the vast majority of Muslims the world over want nothing to do with this. That is absolutely true. But those who answer that call are on solid doctrinal grounds in terms of Islam. And that is what appears to be the case, perhaps with these two in London yesterday, that they were acting on that call to jihad, which, by the way, is binding on all Muslims, whether they choose to obey it or not. And thank goodness for the many millions and hundreds of millions who do not obey it. But they appear to have obeyed that call. And but I would not call them lone wolves because they are part of an international ideological network.
Right.
And
So
that network taught them and trained them.
Right. When I say lone wolves, I'm just talking about not being devout members of Al Qaeda, so to speak. We're talking to Clare Lopez, senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy, former CIA operations officer, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Given our as to quote the great Andy McCarthy, willful blindness to at least by our government to what is actually happening. Barack Obama actually cited Fort Hood as an act of jihad in his speech today, yet he will not classify it as an act of jihad. Do you find that bizarre?
That's amazing, absolutely amazing. Of course, we know we've been waiting for the last 4 years, well, 3.5 years, for the government and certainly the Department of Defense to call the Fort Hood shooting what it was, which, by the way, I would not classify as a terrorist organization attack, because terrorism is acts of violence committed against non-combatants. A soldier of Allah, self-identified as Nidal Hassan was, attacking other soldiers whom he called infidels is an act of war. And again, this goes back to the lone wolf concept. He was not a lone wolf. He was a soldier in a much greater army, worldwide, global Islamic jihad, attacking the army of the infidels as he would see it.
What do we do? I mean, it's not a simple question, and we don't have all day. We only have about a minute left. But what do we do? Does it start with the realization, public acknowledgement of what you're saying by someone like our president? And as long as that doesn't happen, and as long as the questions that the FBI could ask, the training manuals are changed, I mean, it seems like we're going in the we're not just remaining steady. We're going in the complete wrong direction to combat all this.
Yeah, we sure are. And, of course, the first step is to acknowledge the enemy that we face, to name that enemy with the words that the enemy uses to define himself, and then to implement an effective strategy to defeat that enemy, which, by the way, is multifaceted. It's not just military. It is intelligence. It is in the information battle space. It is acknowledging the theological element of Islam as part of this ideology. But we need that overall strategy, and the first part of that is to name the name of the enemy and call him what he is. This is Islamic jihad.
All right, Clare, thank you so much. Enjoy your drive. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Clare Lopez, Senior Fellow, Center for Security Policy, and former CIA operations officer with over 20 years experience.